Hi everybody, I'm Sauce and welcome to my workshop. I'm going to tell you about this crazy idea I have to build a workbench entirely using hand tools. Now, you might ask yourself, why is it that you would want to go and do something as, well, a little bit crazy as doing it all using hand tools when there's all these power tools around them and you can see a jointer right here? The short answer to that is that I feel that building your workbench with hand tools alone is kind of a rite of passage. It's one of these things that you kind of it's like I find that when I'm building things with wood, I always end up, even though I start with power tools, I always end up with a chisel or something because I'm trying to build a mortise and tenon joint or something like that. So I figure what better way to get the practice in to do what I want than by actually building this workbench using nothing but hand tools. So I was going to take you around my shop a little bit and show you the tools that I won't be using, and I'll show you the tools that I will be using. And then, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of my selection of wood, which I'm still working on, and maybe you guys have some advice for me too. This project is something I've just started, so I have not finished it yet. And if anyone has any suggestions, I would love, love, love to hear them. So why don't we go look around? So why don't we start with a little tour of the tools that I intend to use? If you don't mind me reaching for the camera over here, we can start by looking at these hand planes over here. There's actually a funny story behind these 5 hand planes over here. Turns out that I bought them for a really good price off of Craigslist. And there's this guy who had them, and they were all in pretty good shape, and he was selling them for pretty cheap. So when I went over and asked him, I'm like, well, aren't you woodworking anymore? Why are you getting rid of all of these? He turns out that he never actually used them himself. The story is that his name is Stanley, and the reason he bought these tools is because, well, they're Stanley tools too. So maybe the next thing I need to do is find myself someone else on Craigslist whose name is Ferrari or something, and he's trying to sell a car that he's never used. As for these 2 beautiful tools over here, well, they were actually Christmas presents, and I hope to one day be a good enough woodworker to deserve to use tools as beautiful as these. Here's a set of chisels, and you can see these winding sticks that I made recently. Some of you guys might even recognize the design of these winding sticks. I also made this mallet over here. Here's a little hint. It's actually from the same guy who showed how to make this mallet also made these winding sticks. And then there's a collection of hand saws over here that I was going to use to try to cut the wood. I think the craziest thing I'm going to be doing is ripping the lumber actually by hand using hand saws. And I'm really kind of nervous about that because I don't know how to rip 6-foot long pieces of wood using something like this, but I'll discover, I guess, as I go along. Now, why don't we talk a little bit about why this whole idea is crazy? I mean, I showed you a whole set of hand tools that I plan on using, but really the crazy part is that I do have a bunch of power tools that I could also use. I thought I'd show you these tools, but I won't be using them for this project. At least I hope not to. I really, really hope that I can succeed in doing all of this by hand. So why don't we take a look? First of all, now back here you can see there's a big old table saw. That table saw actually could probably do really, really quick work of a lot of this wood. Back there's my bandsaw. I've got my drill press, which you've seen, and there's a dust collector behind there. I might use that, but I don't expect too much sawdust, just where I'm sawing long pieces of wood. There's a lathe over there. Now, I haven't really used that lathe. Most of these tools you can see around here, I bought them used. This is the one that I really wish I could use, but again, I'm not going to. It's my jointer. And then tucked back there where you can't barely see it is a thickness planer. Oh, and I should show you, I guess while I'm at it, here's a CNC machine that I built. It's not turned on right now because the computer that drives it is dead, but I'll take care of that soon. Now, the first thing I have to figure out is what kind of wood is it that I want to use for my workbench. What I did is, I did a bunch of research on the kind of the kind of materials that people use for workbenches. And I noticed that 2 choices that people use quite popularly or commonly are there's ash and there's hard maple. Now, they both have their pros and cons. In terms of ash, it's about 50% cheaper than hard maple, which is a really big advantage. And another thing too is that it might be, because it's softer, it might be easier to work. On the other hand, the hard maple is that much harder, and it has less of a tendency to splinter, which is what some people do kind of say about ash. So what I did to make my decision is I went out and I bought myself a big old piece of ash and a big piece of hard maple over there. And what I was going to do is I was going to try to see if I could cut and dimension at least one piece that would go on the workbench top and one piece that would go on a workbench leg. Maybe enough material for 2 pieces each. We'll figure that out. And then based on my experience working on the wood, I would actually decide which one of the two I'd want to complete the workbench with. In terms of the hardware, well, there's this design that I'm using for the workbench, and they do use some pretty fancy hardware for the tail vise and for a leg vise, but it is a little bit pricey, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to afford that for this project. If any of you guys have any advice on which of the 2 woods I should be using, please do let me know. One thing I want you guys to keep in mind is that I'm not a professional woodworker. This is just a hobby for me, and I've done a few pieces in the past, but I still think that there's so much more for me to learn. So I want you to be patient with me because I'm going to make a lot of silly mistakes, and I hope to actually record this and post it as I'm working on this project. And the reason I want to do that is because I want you guys to see my progress as I'm making it, and I could also really use some advice from you folks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be posting stuff, and if I'm stuck somewhere, I'm really hoping that someone can say, oh, you know what, this is the technique you want to do, or maybe you picked the wrong material, or maybe you picked the wrong tool. Now, if you're looking for expert advice on how to do woodworking and stuff like that, maybe you're going to find that advice in the comments down below, but you're not going to find it from me because I'm still learning. What I can offer, though, is I can offer kind of the perspective of someone who is, a hobbyist who's been paying a lot of attention, watching a lot of videos, reading a lot of blogs and stuff, and really trying to learn. And maybe you can learn alongside with me, and maybe you could avoid some of the mistakes that I might make too. In any case, thank you very much, and please do stick with me throughout this project. Bear with me because I am not an expert carpenter. I actually don't have experience doing this. I just do it for fun, and my profession actually is completely different than this, but I look forward to trying it. Thanks a lot.